You're watching Future Focus. With me is Bronwyn Williams, partner at Flux Trends. Bronwyn, we are now looking at carbon and reusing carbon, which is obviously abundant in our system and generally is seen as a bad element. So talk to me about this trend and the biotechnology companies that are capitalizing on it.
Absolutely fascinating. But when we do look at problems in society, we do tend to find those problems can also be an opportunity viewed the right way. And this is a great example of essentially seeing one man's trash as another man's treasure, or turning a very prevalent problem in our society, that is excess carbon in our atmosphere, into some very, very innovative business ideas. So essentially creating, as we're liking to call it right now, an air economy or an entirely new industry based on extracting carbon and turning it into very, very interesting products. So one of the first case studies we picked up here was a company called Airco, which took atmospheric carbon and turned it into alcohol, into ultra premium, ultra pure vodka. So that's absolutely fascinating. Last year, they sort of pivoted their business model due to what happened with COVID across the world into making hand sanitizer. But essentially, if you can take ethanol out of the atmosphere, you can do all sorts of things with that.
Both is this vodka readily available? Is this vodka readily available?
Yes, you can purchase Airco Premium Vodka. It's an American company. You can go look it up online and you absolutely can go purchase that for yourself. But that's, of course, just the thin end of the wedge. That's on the consumer side. But it gets a lot more interesting because that atmospheric ethanol can also be used to do things like even fuel jet fuel. So now you're talking about taking fossil fuels and reusing them as essentially another source of more clean fuel. It's cleaning up the atmosphere at the same time. It's still allowing us to actually have an economy that works with all these sort of engines that we've already got built and are using across the world. And that's the one thing.
Beauty products also coming to the fore. Elaborate on those trends that we're seeing.
Yes, exactly. So the beauty industry and indeed the FMCG sort of consumer goods industry uses a lot of fossil fuels in their production. So whether they are using things like petrol to make creams or whether they're using alcohols as bases and things like fragrances or in detergents, these can all now be used. A lot of those ingredients, instead of using very, very destructive primary resources and fossil fuels, can now be extracted from the atmosphere. So cleaning up the atmosphere at the same time, we're still able to have the goods and services that we become accustomed to. So it allows us to kind of have our cake and eat it too. If you want to follow that metaphor on, there's another company called Solar Foods, which is basically creating a contemporary equivalent of biblical manna from the heavens, in that they are extracting carbon from the sky and using it to create proteins that can be used in things like lab-grown meats. So we're talking about literally taking food out of what was a pollutant in the sky. Hugely, hugely exciting. And what's interesting is that research really dates back to the days of NASA in the 1960s, when scientists were looking at ways to feed astronauts that would be in space for a very, very long time. But it's very, very exciting to see this whole air economy opening up.
So this is the company there you referenced is Solar Foods.
Solar Foods, yes, they're based in California, as they would be.
And then there's another biotechnology company that you referenced earlier before we started this discussion, Lanatech.
Yes, I think it's LanzaTech. I'm not quite sure of the pronunciation, but they're really looking at this on a more industrial scale. So if Airco and Solar Foods are creating products that consumers like you and I can purchase, LanzaTech is looking at this on a much larger scale. So they're the ones that are supplying those sort of alcohol bases to the fragrance industry, to your very, very, very big companies. Unilever is one of the first ones that started using those products in their supply chain. So you can actually already, if you live in certain countries, buy laundry detergents that have atmospheric carbon inside of them instead of fossil fuels.
Thanks for sharing this theme. Earlier, I was chatting to David Shapiro. We were looking for new companies, accelerators in our future to invest in. And I think, Bronwyn, you've actually hit the nail on the head in terms of this thought process and the air economy. Bronwyn Williams is a partner at Flux Trends.